like it or not, the whole debate has changed. There's no way that you can just repeal Obamacare with nothing to replace it. And that wouldn't have happened without Obama.
In this, you heard what John McCain said. He says all that we have accomplished, meaning the Senate, was to make a non-popular bill more popular.
Well, look, this is what I would say to answer your question. With respect to pre-existing condition, as you know, most people with pre-existing condition were already covered, one, by federal law, that if you were in a group plan that you couldn't be eliminated, and mostly by state laws that did already what Obamacare did. Obamacare covered very few people on that provision, number one. Number two, you are right that Obamacare dramatically expanded Medicaid. I can tell you very few Republicans want to expand Medicaid, and in fact, the provisions we're working on is actually to give the government flexibility to design a different system to...
So here we have a typical couched argument, the paradigm set by the liberal agenda, which is socialism, anathema to our way of life as Americans. They force an issue to be negotiated on their terms. They set the rules, they set the agenda, and if you don't go along with them, you are the bad guy. So they come to a capitalist nation of free enterprise and independence, and they want to turn us into France or Soviet Russia. And the funny thing is, this guy Naftali on the left argues that if it wasn't for Obama, we wouldn't have these discussions about pre-existing conditions and all the issues that Obama helped weave into his insane Obamacare that has failed at every level, at every turn. And yeah, we're having this discourse because they forced this on the American people. Here's the issue. In a capitalist society, when have we had capitalist medical coverage? Never. It was the Bill Clintons of the world and the left that signed NAFTA and GATT and wanted to do the TPP that forced all these jobs out of the country. And heretofore, where did most medical plans come from? That would have been employers. Well, since they've shrunk the American worker into a part-time gnome, subordinated by the slave wages of India, China, and other third world nations, well, companies today don't have to pay for your medical. I mean, if you know anybody that ever had a job in Home Depot, I knew a lot of guys because when their floor covering stores got crushed by them, they ended up having to go to work for them. And in the beginning, in the 90s, they worked at the Home Depot and they had a good deal. They had a living wage job. They had some benefits. Well, you go to Home Depot today and I defy you to find a full-time worker that's been there more than 10 years because they throw you out. They break you down to part-time status and then they dump you. So they don't have to worry about you being vested and having a retirement or medical plans. And if you've ever dealt with these big types of companies subsidized by government criminality, they move into a small town, they put up their box store, they pay no taxes, no water, sewer, yada, yada. 15 years later, they've put out 100,000 businesses and they pay but part-time jobs after wiping out thousands of living wage small businesses that, by the way, paid the bulk of the local property and school taxes. So this is why we're at this place. They drove us off the cliff. And I'm talking about the left, both from a point of employment and medical coverage. And now they're complaining after they drove us off the cliff that the car don't run. And are demanding that the Republicans fix the car and make it run. When those stupid Republicans ought to be saying, we are a capitalist nation. We are a democracy. If you're indigent, the government will see to it that you have medical care. But if you have the means, then going to the private sector is the way to go. But we have to have a private sector that lets you buy medical coverage anywhere in the United States, not force you to stay within a state. So what is it with these politicians that want to always force you to go through government? Where would your money go when you went food shopping if you had to go to a government-approved grocery store? How far would your money go? I'll give you an example of that. In Ireland, the people in the Republic would shop in Northern Ireland because one was on the pound sterling and the other, the South, was on the euro. And for many years, the euro exchange rate with the pound forced these poor people in Ireland to go up to Northern Ireland where they got almost twice the amount of groceries for their money. Well, what did that do to the local economies in Ireland? Well, it killed them. If you were a grocer or a clothing store, you got put out of business. But don't worry, some big box store will come in and really crush you. Let me tell you something. Monopolies have to stop. We have to do something about monopolies. We need to reintroduce and instigate small business and independent job markets. That's not going to be done through corporations because their whole model is perverse and adverse to capitalism. To have 3 behemoth companies left in every industry, whether it's banking or airlines or retail outlets, isn't really great for the consumer. So the bottom line is, and by the way, the ultimate justice for these gangsters is Amazon.com. They're taking the box stores to the next level. They're crushing them. And so pretty soon there'll be no reason to leave your house. You just pick up your smartphone or your laptop and you can order everything from a sex change to your family dinner meal. It's pretty sick. I don't know. But politics should have nothing to do with your right to health care. It should be an independent thing. You should be able to shop for your health care like any other commodity. You should be able to get the best you can get for your money. And people with pre-existing conditions and all these straw dogs that the politicians want to set up, well, that's easily remedied. But I'll tell you something that I find amazingly perverse. I know people that have drank booze their whole life, smoked cigarettes, engaged in orgies, and overate. And all the bad stuff, by the way. You said you need to take better care of yourself, you were a problem. Now, I don't want to sound preachy, but why is that anyone else's problem? And now, we have to spend $50 billion on opioids. Really? I'm 61 years old. I never even seen an opioid. That these little snowflakes are so stressed out when they can't run to their safety place that they got to go on opioids by 18 years old? Let me tell you something, my heart pumps piss for you. There's people with real problems that they didn't deserve. Little children born with cancers and leukemias or diabetes. These were not choices. Don't come to me and tell me alcoholism is a disease when you spent your whole life perfecting being a drunk. It's a choice. This country is like an unbelievable non-ending clapper commercial. I've fallen and I can't get up. Somebody bring me the clapper. Clap on, clap off. You know, we need a new motto in America. It ought to be called Grow the Fuck Up and get government out of your life. Because you're inviting them into your bedroom. These pricks will take everything you give them a shot at. Most of all, what they want is for you to be reduced to an ib, a gnome, a slave, a non-entity, because it gives them that much more kingly power. Read the great writers and thinkers in history, especially as it relates to democracy and capitalism. Nobody can know what's right for you more than you. Ralph Waldo Emerson, and I paraphrase self-reliance. To believe in your mind what's true for you in your heart is to be genius. The best person to govern your life is you, not me, not some government rat, self-proclaimed know-it-all, like Hillary Clinton wants to tell you what village to live in. She's got the modality for your problems. But meanwhile, she couldn't keep Wet Willie's car in his garage, if you get my drift. But she knew how to steal. And she's a typical political animal. Capital A. And how did we get to this place? From a nation of rugged individualists, the greatest nation in the world. Look, I know there's deficiencies, and I know that, but to turn anything over to the government, just consider that. Imagine if you had to check in before you made love to someone. Where are you going to shop for food? Look, technology that's coming on the world can be the greatest enhancer to freedom or the greatest enslaver. And we're at that point right now where we don't know which way this is going. The access to information that's exploding is biblical. And in those days, knowledge will be greatly increased. That's what the Bible says about the last days. And consider your smartphone or your tablet. Who would believe you could have the libraries of the world in the palm of your hand? 20 years ago, it was unimaginable. So these questions are a lot more heady than the politicians of our time. John McCain is a metaphor for this. You think the world has passed the guy by? I'm not talking about in everything. He made a nice speech today. He means well a lot of times. But they are so invested in the concept that they have to make the decisions for everybody's life all the time that I don't think this can be fixed. You know, morality goes up and down. Politics goes right and left. The one isn't a modality for the other. But of all the people you don't want to turn your life over to, and your manifest destiny and your self-reliance is government. These people have been on the big tit their whole career. They are entitled, selfish, self-absorbed, egotistical, and completely adverse to the laws of gravity that most people in the real world have to live and die with. And they've set these rules up to exacerbate that logic. If you have a company of over 600 people in America, you have to have so many whites, so many blacks, so many women, so many. But the Congress and the Senate, which has on average 700 staff members, employees for each one of them, is exempt of those same laws. I mean, we led the way as a country, as a culture and a nation, in the concept of the rulers will do what the people have to do, and we will do what we say. So Ben Franklin, better than well said, is well done. That's from the New Testament. That was Jesus talking. These concepts of justice and fairness weren't just slogans. It doesn't mean they were perfect. They had a lot of foibles. And history is replete with the failings, but consider where the world was in 1776 from a point of social and cultural evolution. It doesn't negate the constructs or the foundation that they laid, because those were genius. But to have these non-producers of society, these hanger-ons, these bogus pseudo decision makers tell you they know what's best. I mean, if anybody could listen to any government bureaucrat after Obamacare's monumental failing from day one. Remember, they couldn't get the website up. What'd they spend on that? How many billions? And there was a web designer that went on the news that night and said, I could have set this up for $100,000 and it would have worked 100 times better. But we, the taxpayers, spent literally tens of billions of dollars for a bogus website that, by the way, they scrapped. Now, if that wasn't a bellwether for what was to come, you want to talk about governments? I don't care if it's the Soviet system, the Nazis, the English colonial governments. Look at what government has brought to the world in the last 150 years. How many millions of deaths? How many stupid wars? That's what government does. And then they turn around and blame capitalists or industrialists. You know, people think corporate America is evil. Always remember this. The difference between the corporate side of our country and the political side is when it's corporations, you have options. You don't like the policies at GM? Go buy a Ford. You don't like the way the product works? Go buy its competitor. You don't have that choice with government. And when they stick that fat hand in the system and they grab the whatever offering it is by the neck and take over control of something, the ultimate end game franchise is fascism. Inevitably, if government is unchecked, it always leads to fascism. And the merger of state and corporate powers, state powers and corporations, is fascism. And you're seeing it today. Do you know who's behind Facebook, Amazon, Google? Do you know that's not the government? Ms. Magazine was benefacted and underwritten by the CIA. Because 40 some odd years ago or 50 years ago, they wanted the women to become just as exploited as men. Get them out in the workplace. They're not watching their kids, we'll take care of them. And we'll make them our servants. In the 80s, they told us, we're not going to be in manufacturing too much longer. We're going to be a service-oriented society. The root word for service is servile. Serf. That's called slavery light. Don't listen to these bunco artists.